Can be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. So now the topic of our discussion is going to move a little bit towards language. And the main issue we're going to discuss, because language is a lot to be discussed, is language as a main source, language representation as a source of bias. Oops, well, something. Let me go. Okay. Okay, well, this is our schedule. Changing.
Can we go to slide 86? Okay.
Okay, we're there, yes. Okay, so this is a brief sketch for today. We are going to have a very short introduction. We are trying to do some hands-on activity on these particular issues of language representation, and then some guided discussion so that you can participate in this online discussion. Okay. When we talk about language representation, we mean two things in particular. One is how languages, and language varieties are represented in the kind of resources that we build in NLP, right? And the second one is how language represents people in the research we carry out within NLP. So we are going to see examples of these two dimensions of language representation. For the first question, our idea is a hands-on activity. Let's see if you can follow this activity. And the thing is, our idea is, have you ever wondered which languages and to what extent they are represented in the available repositories that we have nowadays, right? I've selected 4 of them. Maybe you're aware of them. One is Clarin, the European Language Grid, Hagen Face, which is a very famous one. And there's another one with the catalog of ELRA. So the idea is, if you search in these 4 catalogs, can you find your language? Can you find resources in your language? Are they easy to be discovered? Would you like to try? What do you think? Yes, you have to say yes.
Try.
Yes, yes. Can you scan the code and tell us whether you can find resources in your language? The language you spoke, the language you study?
So if you're not shy or you're too far in the back of the room, you can come up. So just pick a number 1 through 4, roll a 4-sided die in your mind, right? Pick one of the QR codes to scan, and then try to do this exercise. We'll go back to the slide with the questions in another 10 to 30 seconds after everyone has had a chance to take their device of some sort and visit one of the websites. Yes, Orly.
The binary question, like, is my language in one of the resources, or is it like, is there a lot of coverage of it?
I would say both. Is it there, and to what extent is it covered? Right? Yeah. And can you easily get to those resources? Because that's another issue, right? Are they easy to easily recoverable there? Yeah.
Maybe our varieties of my language.
Yes. We mean language varieties. Sometimes they are called dialects. Yes, exactly. All sorts of varieties.
Okay, if you've scanned the QR code, maybe we'll go back to the previous slide. Anyone hasn't been able to pick up one of the different resources? I mean, we are partially doing this to also make you aware that these resources are there and to also point out the gaps of coverage that you might find.
Go back.
So again, what we hope that you can try to do is search for relevant tools on one of the platforms. You can try this exercise again later on. For the other resources that have been listed in the slides, again, the slides are available to you. Think about how easy it is to discover the tools and to search for the languages or the dialects that are present. You know, we come from a very heterogeneous representations of language, so it may be a bit difficult. You may want to think about the metadata information available. Was it sufficient or accurate enough? And are there things that you know as language technologists, as people in computational linguistics or pure linguistics that should have been listed that are missing, right? So we're going to stop here for about 5 to 10 minutes.
See, maybe fewer minutes.
A few more minutes, okay?
No,
So
fewer.
fewer, okay, maybe about 5 minutes, and let you explore, because I think that's really necessary that we have hands-on time on task. If you come from a multilingual background, then you can try multiple languages. So I hope our online participants will be able to do this too. So normally in a classroom, I'll play like Jeopardy song or something like that for 30 seconds, but we'll just pause for about 2 minutes. Yes, I'll say.
Yeah. You will try. You want my phone?
Yeah, you can time as well.
You know when you're there. Name each one, but who was knew about this resource.
So you can discovery ability.
You can do that, and I think it's good.
Okay. I'll do the survey and then you can continue. Is that okay?
What you think? Yeah. Okay. No problem. All this, that is good.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got another minute. So just keep in mind, we're going to have a survey in the room with hands in a minute. Okay, so time is up. So we're going to do a quick survey of the room, and we'll just keep this slide up. How many of us tried the Clarion resource? Just a raise of hands. Okay, that looks like a good fourth, so you can look around and see who did that. How about the European language grid? Oh, we're pretty good at doing randomization. All right, Hugging Face. Oh, slightly more. Okay, and Elra's catalog? Awesome. So it's pretty evenly distributed. So I'm going to start with our participant online, Rudali Huidrom, said they were looking at Manipuri, and I'm not sure which language family that is, from Meiteilon. And Clarion does not have any language resources there. European Language Grid does have. Hugging Face does have, and Elra does have. So we're going to do the same thing in this room. So if anyone who looked at the Clarion resource, if your language was represented, can you raise your hand? Okay. And how many of us who looked at Clarion, your language was not represented? Okay, can I invite you to tell us which language was not represented? Okay, so just for the audience online, our participant said he tried to find Taiwanese, but it was not present. Okay, so that's a good start. Okay, so we'll do the second one as well, the European grid. How many of us found our language that we're interested in the European grid from those who looked? Okay, and how many of us explored that and we couldn't find our languages? Okay, again, Miss, could you volunteer and help out? Saxonian? Okay, and that was not represented in that. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, and then for Hugging Face, how many of us searched on Hugging Face and found our language that we are interested in? Okay, and how many of us couldn't find the language that we were looking for? Okay, sir, yeah, maybe you can tell us which language?
I mean, I found my mother tongue kind of, but the dialect that I speak is missing. Well, I come from India, so there's like 200 different languages. And the person who put the name Manipuri is also an Indian language. And usually such low resource languages, and it's hard to find the resource. I'm not surprised.
Okay, so our respondent said that he's from an Indian language family. There are over 200, even actually quite a bit more, right? Indian languages, and many of them are not represented. So his particular dialect, I think, was not represented in Hugging Face. Is that correct? Okay. And our final one for Elra, how many of us found our language family in there or language represented? And how many of us could not find our represented language? Okay, here, sir, did you say? Okay, Clementine, yeah?
Alsatian, it's not
Okay, so our presenter, Clementine, was looking for Alsatian, which is French language, if I understand correctly, and it was not represented in the ELRA resource. Okay, so we can see that there's a whole smattering of different languages, especially dialects, that are not very well represented. I just want to check with you, for all of you who did successfully find your language, did you find resources that you didn't know about through this process? Can I have a show of hands? Okay, so that's good. So we tried at least one tool, but there are at least 3 others. And those of us who know other resources that are not represented on this list, because of course, Adriana and myself do not have a comprehensive list. Nobody really does, right? Then it's very helpful for you to help us out and participate and give back. And so we can compile these resources again. So stay tuned for that towards the closing part of the session. So I'll turn it over to Adriana for the second part.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So let's move a little bit now here. All right. And okay, so this is interesting because I'm a linguist, right? This is my main field, and I work particularly preparing these kind of resources, the ones that are going to be fed into these repositories, right? So this is very interesting. This you can see the results here. This is a paper in which this is an analysis that was published on the European Language Grid. So you can see in green, we have the, let's see, it's the data sets, right? Yeah, in yellow software. And as you might expect, right, you see which languages within, let's say, right, this European group of languages, which are more represented, most represented, and and less represented. And you see that, as you might expect, right, English, right, English, Spanish, right, German, French, right? Usually are the languages that are most represented, and some other languages are not, right? So this is very interesting. There's also this work also published here, and this has to do with languages mentioned in ACL publications. So the idea is, I mean, these are languages that are mentioned in papers. So we assume that if they are mentioned, probably there is a study working on those languages, right? So again, if we compare these two, some of the languages are vastly overrepresented and some others are not, right? And the interesting thing, I don't know if you see right at the bottom, it says 0, right? This is, I understand, a particular dialect, right, that is spoken in Sweden and Finnish, Tornedalian. So the idea is that sometimes we think of, well, there are dialects that are not represented at all, right, in other regions, but still in Europe, there are many, many regional dialects and varieties, as you showed today, that are not represented at all, right, in our own resources, in our own papers, and the resources we produce for the community. I would like to show you as well, right? I don't know if you're aware of this project, Universal Dependencies. This is a project in which we annotate dependency syntax. And so you see here the 3 banks that are available. In these resources, we can see many more languages, right? For example, in my case, I'm from Brazil, so there are several indigenous languages that have their own 3 banks, which is very good, right? But still, if you look at the number of 3 banks, again, right? English has one of the biggest numbers, English, German, French, right? Spanish. And so this tells you a little bit about this idea of how language representation actually does create bias in the kind of work we produce, right? So this is an issue that we need to discuss. What are we doing about this? Okay, well, there is a very interesting project going on. I myself, I'm a member of this. This is called UNIDIVE. It's funded by the European Union. And so in this project, we make sure that more and more language, and by language, I mean language varieties, dialects, sublanguages, get to be represented, right, in NLP resources. This is an ongoing project, and so I welcome you, if you're interested in participating or in whatever way, to join us. So this is something positive we are doing to somehow address this imbalance in language representation in our own community, right? Computational linguistics. Now, if we move to the second part, okay, of our talk, now the idea is to look at how the language we use when we talk about people creates bias, right? And by this, we mean how we sometimes, as researchers in computational linguistics, we choose some words and language, and sometimes without being aware of it and unintentionally, we do create bias and we propagate this kind of bias, right? So in this case, this is so high for me, okay? Okay, thank you so much, okay. So we are going to give some examples, right? We have chosen examples from the healthcare domain. I myself particularly work with clinical narratives in the healthcare domain. So sometimes the problem is that the language that we use in our resources and our data sets and in our research ends up using words that are used in this language, I mean, in the language that they use in healthcare. So we as computer linguists, right, computational linguists, we end up propagating this kind of bias. So, for example, I don't know if you are aware of this, some words that are considered stigmatized. I give some example here, right? You have some references for some work. So, for example, sometimes, when you go to and you mine, right, resources in healthcare, some resources use words such as addict, substance abuser, alcoholic, when we know that there are some other words that are being proposed by several organizations and institutions that substitute those words, right? Because they are meant to reduce this kind of imbalance in how we refer to people, right? So, for example, in the case of addict, a person with the substance use disorders, a very common word, diabetic, right? Nobody thinks that diabetic can create bias, but that's extremely negative and biased word, right? So the World Health Organization seems, I don't know, many years for now, right? By now, they are suggesting we should refer to them as person with diabetes, okay? Same, you have seen some examples here, person with schizophrenia, with sickle cell disease, and that. Right? So the thing is that sometimes because we take those words from the way these people are named in some other studies and we use them in our data sets, we unintentionally are propagating bias, right? I don't know if you get my point. If we think of some other examples, right, this is very interesting. I'm sure that all of us have used this native speaker label, right? So I myself have seen this in many papers in ACL, right? So we refer to the native speaker, right? And there are many studies, right, showing that this is an extremely biased label, right? So we invite you to think it over. Right? When you describe your data set or your experiment, right? And we say, well, these are native, non-native speakers, right? What are the implications of naming somebody as a native or non-native, right? And this has to do with similar other labels, right? Like when we refer to rest of the world, right? Because we say, oh, this is a list of countries, and when your country is not there, right, you are rest of the world, right? And this, I mean, is something that we see a lot, right? In all, yeah. There are also other labels, right? Third world country, developed, underdeveloped. You know, these two are, I think they are somehow being not used anymore. But we have the global north and the global south, right? And I'm sure that many of us are using these two without even thinking about them, right? What kind of bias we are projecting. And the same when we refer to non-English speaker, right? I don't know if you're aware of this, but you know, when you say non-something, right? You are projecting a view, right? Bias, because you're projecting a view of somebody that lacks something, right? So we invite you to think about this, right? And there's also, I would like to invite you to look at ACL papers in ACL ontology. If you write those words, right, like diabetic, non-native, third world, right, and to see the number of papers in our community that use those labels. Last but not least, right, there is a very interesting initiative. This is run by the University of Exeter and some other universities. If you're interested, right, the Ethical Data Initiative, make sure you consult this webpage because they have a very good and solid initiative on these ethical issues. And I think we can open the floor for discussions, right? Me? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Any question? No? Sure. Would you like to come to the mic? Yeah. Not, but because people who are online cannot hear you.
Okay, no
Yeah.
problem.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So you're asking how you could refer to a non-native speaker of a language, any language. Well, that's an interesting question because actually, in applied linguistics, we don't use the label native and non-native. Yeah, this has been going on for decades now, right? So one way is when if you have a multilingual community, right? So you would specify which of the languages a person is more proficient in, or basically how a person declares himself or herself, right? So sometimes you could number, for example, in translation studies, right? You could number them as L1, L2, right? which again carries some stigma because you have a numbered sequence, right? But this idea is still, I mean, you avoid the word native, right? Which is not so, yeah. We normally use multilingual speakers with and you fill it in with a background, okay? With an English background, with a German background, whatever, yeah. Okay, very interesting question, yeah. Sure.
So, hello, I'm Steffi from Hochschule München and LMU Munich, and I wanted to go back to the languages included. So, in general, so it seems like you proposing that we should include all of the languages and all of the dialects, but I think it might also be a choice to not be included, because if I'm not included, there are no stereotypes about my language or my dialect. So maybe I think it's a New Zealand project where they have a language resource where they can actually choose what kind of utterances are added to the resource, and it's intentionally not part of the big corporation. So I wanted to ask you, do you think that we should include all of the languages?
Well, I mean, I'm not asking for my personal opinion, right? What I have seen, I think you should give the choice, right? So first of all, the choice to be or not to be included. But if you don't have that choice, right? So that's a starting point, yeah? So we know, for example, some endangered languages, right? So once you have resources for endangered languages, languages that are very rapidly disappearing, right? This is a way of promoting these languages to a kind of heritage, okay? So I think, first of all, you have the choice, right, to be included or not. And then maybe think about this idea of preserving languages, right? Yeah. Karen, would you? Yeah.
Just want to react and mention that's a very acute problem at the moment. The Romani community expressed a lot of concern about the fact that their one variety of their language was included in Google Translate, and they were against it for obvious historical reasons. They don't want to share their language. Plus, it was just one variety, and Romani is an entire spectrum of languages. And so these raises really interesting issues, and that's an ongoing conversation about, I relate you should read maybe the paper by Stephen Bird in 2020 that's about decolonizing speech and language processing. It's a very nice paper. Some people disagree with the paper, but it's a good basis of discussion. The question is, should we make these decisions for the communities? Who are we to make these decisions for them? They should make the decisions. And if they disagree, well, they should say so. And maybe there's the discussion itself is interesting. And as a community, NLP community, we don't have the right to do that. And that's what Stephen Bird says. Some other people have other opinions, but I think it's interesting to hear that. And one last point I wanted to tell you, there's a law in NLP, that's the Emily Bender's law, and that it says that you should mention the language you're working on, because there's no such thing as no language, and English is not the international language. It's just one, and it's very specific. And if your system is working on English, it doesn't mean at all that it will work on other languages, because it's so specific. So this is the first law of NLP and ethics. It's mention the language you're working on. And we had a paper with Fanny a couple of years ago on that. And I can tell you, lots of paper at ACL don't even mention the language you're working on. That's a huge ethical issue, because it means that you consider your language, the language you're working on, as so obvious, so important that you don't even have to mention it.
Any comment, question? No time. One more, I mean, yeah, yes, just one more. Okay. So can we keep it for the session after the coffee break? Yes? Yes? Okay, so I promise, yeah, I promise you will have your time. Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah. Interesting question.
So please come back. We'll have much more interactive discussion after the break. So caffeinate yourself and come back. Thank you so much.
Go further.
Hi, everyone. While they're sorting out the next session, which will be interactive, I know there were some leftover questions from the last session. So now that the coffee break is over, if you still have remaining questions from the last session, we can take this opportunity to have the discussion now before we move on to the reading and discussion part of the tutorial. And yeah, in the interest of the online audience, before you have your question, please introduce yourself with your name and affiliation, please.
Bit too high. So, hi, I'm Wei Fan from Bonn University. So I had a question about the also about this language differences in the resources. Especially, we see that in most of the large language model, they are all based in English. They use the English to train all their models. Even those like you can say this Chinese-based company DeepSeek, they still use English in their reasoning process behind. So it seems like English is a dominant language in training large language model and so on. Well, I think the ultimate solution is not really that every language train their own large language model, but I do thought like let's say if I want to use certain languages in like for example like a chat, I always feel like it's translated from English to some extent. So what's your thought in this trend that everyone using English in the large language model training?
Do we have any reactions to that? Using English just for large language model training. I didn't quite catch all of the details, so any of our panelists would like to? Aurélie? Yeah.
So maybe one thought about that. I'm Aurélie Nevel from CNRS. I think it's a very good point that you put forward. That it's actually a fact at the moment that English is largely predominant in the language models that go around. And so I don't have an answer about what should we do, but so maybe that's something that should be at least studied. So I know that for French, we have a model called Croissant LLM, which uses training data that is 50% from English and 50% from French. Well, it's not exactly that because there's also other elements there, but it's a balanced model. And so maybe this kind of model can be used to try to understand what are the differences between English as a majority models and other types of models. And so one of the reasons that motivated the creation of this model for French at least was to try to study the language productivity of the models, because the tokenization is done differently depending on the languages, and that then has an impact on the different tasks that the models are used to. So I think it's an important question and it should be studied. Basically, that's a summary.
Maybe just a quick comment. There are other initiatives. For example, in Italy, there is a quite developed model. Built entirely on the Italian language. Again, when we say Italian language, right, we have to bear in mind that what is it that we call, right, Italian, but there are also individual models built on Italian dialects. And in Brazil, we have an initiative to build our own model based on Brazilian Portuguese, right? And again, Brazilian Portuguese has to be understood as a kind of compromise among different dialects and regional varieties, right? So I think there are emerging initiatives which I think they are welcome, right? Because this means more diversity, right, in these large language models.